Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Shuklam Baradaram Vishnam Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyayet Sarva Vignopashantaye. The Param Vedanta team welcomes you to the second session of Bhagavad Gita verse by verse. Last week we saw how Arjuna was severely afflicted by grief and confusion with regard to his sense of duty. He drops his Gandiva and surrenders to Krishna to help him cross the ocean of samsara. Arjuna says while surrendering, Karpanya dosho pata swabhava praschami tvam dharma sammuda chetaha yashreyasya nishchitam bruhi tanmay shishya sateshadi mam tvam prapannam. Now we realize the dilemma of Arjuna resonates with the problems of our lives. From now on, Krishna is no more a Parthasarthi. He's a charioteer. He's become a guru, a Jagat Guru. And Arjuna becomes a seeker. Today, we will be listening to the first 6 verses spoken by Krishna as a Jagat Guru. But before that, Dr. Komal Prasad will give us a brief summary of chapter 1 and the first 10 verses of chapter 2. Towards the end of the class, Neetaji will chant the 6 verses for us. Do chant along with her. For the new joinees, a few words about our teacher. Caring as a mother, persistent as a father, personal follow-ups like a tutor. Ushering in knowledge, he has encouraged us and driven us to understand our true nature, changing our lives, all in silence, with no expectation, but as a matter of Lokarina and Acharya Rina. He is an ardent Vedantin, a patient listener with total faith, and has a unique method of teaching. We are blessed to get this knowledge through the Guru Parampara and our teacher, Dr. Thimmappa Hegde. Over to you, sir.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Leading a healthy, happy, disease-free life at the physical level requires taking care of 2 factors. One is adjusting the external condition, that's maintaining hygiene. And second is to improve our internal resistance or immunity for disease. By now, we know for coronavirus, adjusting the external condition is by social distancing, wearing mask properly, and washing hands regularly. To improve internal resistance, we have vaccine. Similarly, to lead a healthy, happy life at a psychological level also, 2 factors are important. One is taking care of external circumstances, how the world is responsible for my worry and what I do about my relationships, home, work environment, and the consequent anxiety, stress, worry, anger, jealousy, etc. Taking care of the environment is the first factor. That's what we always try to do, trying to change people we interact with, trying to get adjusted to the environment, people, including the government. We try to adjust the external factors or get adjusted. The second factor is internal. It is to have sufficient mental strength to face the situation. The subject matter of Bhagavad Gita is developing this inner resistance, not changing the external world. Gita is talking about strengthening myself and finding my inner resistance and consequent freedom from psychological disturbances. This is moksha. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita is a moksha shastra, resistance building shastra, not physical, resistance at the inner level. And it's meant for who? It's meant for those people who recognize that we must improve our resistance, that I have got psychological weakness, that I am susceptible to raga, dvesha, kama, krodha. Frequently, I'm getting into psychological breakdown, and it's affecting other people also. And I require that inner strengthening. So Gita is addressing the one who has discovered this problem. And in the first chapter of Gita, Arjuna discovers his weakness, and later he becomes a spiritual seeker, and then he surrenders to Krishna, and Krishna gives the self-knowledge vaccine, hoping that this will give the necessary inner strength. First, Vyasacharya presents the context in which Arjuna catches the disease, that he feels the disease of samsara or inner weakness. So in the Mahabharata battlefield Kurukshetra, Pandavas and Kauravas have assembled to fight it out and settle their issues. And Arjuna is very clear that he's doing the right thing. He never had a conflict or guilt because he knew that this was the last resort and all the peaceful measures have failed. Next, Arjuna somehow feels like seeing closely the people who he must fight with. This moment, Krishna mischievously places the chariot in front of people towards whom Arjuna has got a strong weakness, an intense attachment. Then Arjuna discovers his weakness, the problem of attachment, a psychological dependence. This is a weakness because the moment I am psychologically dependent on any factor, my happiness gets hooked into it, connected to the external factor, and happiness is no more in my hands. The psychological dependence or need is called the problem of raga, attachment, a leaning. It's an expectation. Here, Arjuna expects certain people to be around him all the time. Imagining a life without Bhishma, without Drona, he breaks down. Consequence of raga is shoka, sorrow, or vishada, grief. That's why the first chapter is titled Arjuna Vishada Yoga. Grief is an inevitable consequence of dependence. Leaning on an unpredictable, perishable factor is going to cause sorrow. The intensity of grief depends on intensity of attachment. It's like addiction. This shoka will lead to moha or confusion, an indecision, a conflict within, delusion about what to do and what not to do, otherwise called aviveka, a sudden feeling that I am hanging in the middle of the sky, not knowing what to do in life, to fight or not to fight. Arjuna's mind wavers and he thinks Yuddha is adharma. He feels Yuddha is papa. Dharma, adharma, confusion happens. He gets into a series of arguments to justify his delusion about why he wishes not to fight and wants to run away from the battlefield. So these three put together, the raga, shoka, and moha, attachment, sorrow, and delusion, together is called samsara. And anyone having these three is a samsari. Therefore, Arjuna discovers his problem, the problem of samsara. Generally, once we get a problem, we will not try to get a solution from outside. We try to solve it ourselves. After trying several methods, when the disease does not get cured by my own method, there will be a feeling of helplessness. I have a problem and I don't know how to get out of it. This is the discovery of helplessness, the karpanyam or dhainya bhava. The natural step is to surrender at that moment to someone who will give me a hand. Sharanagati. Once Arjuna discovers this helplessness, he immediately surrenders to Jagadguru Lord Krishna. I am your disciple. Just like a patient surrenders himself in front of the doctor. I do not know what the disease is. Only you know. Please treat me. Whatever course the treatment you suggest, I am ready to take. The Arjuna goes through the third stage. Then comes the fourth stage where Krishna accepts patient Arjuna, the disciple Arjuna, and decides to give him the program of treatment. Samsara Nirvana Aushadam. Samsara Nivarana Aushadam, called Gita Shastra. We should also discover the problem and surrender to a guru. Remember that the discovery of the problem is particularly important. Wound is the place where light enters you, says Rumi. With Guru's help, we will find a solution. Once you have understood that you can throw away the story part like the sugar cane, bite the sugar cane, take the juice and spit out the remnant. Similarly, bite the entire first chapter, take the juice. And what's the juice? To discover the problem, discover the helplessness, surrender, learn, and be free. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Komal, for giving us a nice summary of the previous class. Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Danyoham means we are so blessed, we are so fortunate to be able to study the Bhagavad Gita in detail once again. This is a verse which comes from the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the 3rd verse, which goes like this: Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye. Among the thousands and thousands of human beings in the world, it's only a handful, a small number, who are able to come to this level, what we are, to be able to have this privilege of studying this glorious scripture. But then Krishna gives a warning. Yatatam api siddhanam kaschin mapdeti tatvatha. Tatvataha. Of these few people, only a handful can go up to the 18th chapter, 66th verse, where Krishna gives the concluding message. At that stage, we should be whole. Kritakrityoham. Kritakrityoham means I'm so full. I'm so purna. I'm so complete. And the Bhagavad Gita has this promise. So on this day, as we begin the formal study of the Gita Upadesha by Sri Krishna, let us anchor on our gratefulness that we have this opportunity, but also make this a commitment that every week we will have one class. Sometimes it will be two classes. It will have a commitment to finish 700 verses in hopefully within a year's time. So sometimes it will be two classes a week. So it is between 6 to 12 verses a week that we need to pay our attention, that every verse is studied thoroughly. Before we study any scripture in our tradition, there is something called Anubandha Chatustaya. It is just like when you go to a bookshop and you see some new book, the first thing that you would look back is to turn to the back page to read about what is this book all about? What are the benefit that I would get? Is this book for me? Now, this is exactly the four things that we need to inquire before we study any scriptural work. First is what is called the Vishaya. What is the subject matter of the Bhagavad Gita? Second, and all of us are very practical people, we'd like to know what is the prayojana, what is the benefit of studying the Bhagavad Gita. Third, am I eligible to study the Bhagavad Gita? And the fourth is called Sambandha. Sambandha means the relationship between the subject and the benefit, the relationship between the subject and the eligibility, the relationship between the prayojanam and adhikari. So we can have multiple such relationships. Now, all these will come in the first verse of the Bhagavad Gita, which will be explained to us by Chaitanya. Over to you, Chaitanya, please.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. So far, we have seen Arjuna succumbing to samsara, and in the process, he goes through raga, shoka, and moha. And all of these emotions we can identify with him. In the previous verse, we saw that Arjuna indicating that he is ready to accept help by uttering the words Prapanna and Shadima. So with these words, a sorrowful Arjuna surrenders to Sri Krishna for a solution to his problems. Now there is a shift in the dynamics of their relationship. Arjuna becomes a student, and Krishna, the friend and charioteer, becomes the teacher, Gitacharya. Krishna till now had deliberately kept quiet because Arjuna was not ready to listen. He was caught up in his own delusion and trying to solve it himself. It's like some people make a self-diagnosis of their health issues and try to self-medicate with disastrous results. Only after they approach the doctor, only then they approach the doctor and are ready to be treated. In the same way, Krishna allows Arjuna to vent out all his sorrow, and then finally, helpless, Arjuna looks towards Krishna for answers. Once Arjuna is ready to listen, then only Krishna takes over, and immediately Krishna shifts into top gear. Remember, this is happening in the middle of the battlefield, and he wants Arjuna to pick up his bow and fight as soon as possible. So Krishna begins with a philosophical or adhyatmic approach to deal with Arjuna's samsara. But once he finds that Arjuna is not ready for this, he brings it down to dharmic and then further down to worldly angle so that Arjuna can relate to it. So Arjuna begins with this 11th verse in the second chapter by saying, Asochan anvasochastvam prajnavadham shabhashase gatasu nagatasu na anusochanti panditaha. This is the central message of the Gita. And the rest of the Gita from the next verse up to the 66th verse in the 18th chapter is an elaboration of this verse. That is why Adi Shankaracharya begins commentary on the Bhagavad Gita from this seed verse. The entire Gita Shastra is condensed here. So what is the essence in this verse? Krishna wants to convey that self-ignorance is the cause of all human problems, and that self-knowledge is the only way out of it. Atma Ajnanam Samsara Karanam, Atma Jnanam Moksha Karanam. So moksha is the only way we can get out of samsara. So how does Krishna convey this idea here? In the second line, he says, Na anusochanti panditaha, means wise people do not grieve. Wise people here is panditaha. Who are the wise people? They are the ones with self-knowledge. In other words, he wants to say that those who grieve are ignorant about their real self. So Krishna's message here is also to all of us. It is relevant even now. He repeatedly says, do not grieve, again and again in the first subsequent verses. Sochutam na arhasi. Why is he emphasizing this? He wants us to know that grief that we feel is because of attachment and love. And Arjuna, including us, mistake it to be love. Attachment and love are not the same thing. Attachment leads to bondage and psychological dependence, whereas love signifies freedom and selflessness. So Gita is against attachment and not love. So what is the solution for ignorance? It is self-knowledge. That is the only remedy. It's like if the room is dark, the only solution is to bring in light. In the same way, nothing else can remove self-ignorance except self-knowledge or jnanam. That is why Krishna is emphasizing, become wise and you will not grieve. Grief regarding what? He says, Gatasun agatasuncha. Wise people do not grieve either for the living ones or for the dead ones. They do not grieve for which is past, and they do not grieve for the present or for the future. He says further, Asochan anvasocha. Anvasocha. Arjuna, you are grieving for those people who do not deserve any grief. Because all those on the Kaurava side, even if they are your relatives or friends, are adharmic. So prajna vadamscha bhashase. Don't speak like a wise person when you are not one. So what is Krishna's message to all of us through Arjuna? If we are grieving for the loss or the very thought of loss, then we have not understood the message given in the Gita. Like an actor who dons several roles and plays all of them to the best of his abilities, but at the end of the drama, he does not identify with any of them. He knows that he is not the role he played. So play the role that life has given to the best of your ability as a son, daughter, father, boss, etc. But we will tend to argue that my suffering is real. So here, take a step back for a moment and then ask the question, who is really suffering? If you go to see, it is the role of the mother, the father, the son that is suffering, not the real I. When you get up from a good sleep, you don't say the mother in me has slept well, but we say I has slept well. So inquire, who is this I? Thus, Krishna's message from this verse onwards is to tell us that the real I is not the person who I think I am. And I have to make an inquiry into who am I to get out of this samsara problem. The rest of the Gita from here on gives us the answer to who am I. Thank you. Hari Om.
Thank you, Chaitanya, for a nice explanation of this opening verse, Shri Bhagavan Vacha. I had the very good fortune of being able to listen to Swami Dayananda Saraswati speak on 10 essential verses of the Bhagavad Gita. And of those 10 essential verses, he puts this verse as one of the most important verses and the key verse. And he repeatedly says that the whole of the Bhagavad Gita is an unfoldment of this particular verse. Why is this verse given so much importance? I will repeat what Chaitanya has already said. Krishna condenses the entire Gita Shastra here by saying that self-ignorance is the cause of all human problems and the way out is self-knowledge. In Sanskrit, it would be atma ajnanam samsara karanam, atma jnanam moksha karanam. Therefore, our objective will be here to be able to get atma jnanam. Adi Shankara, in his commentary, has said the Bhagavad Gita gives a lot of topics. there is bhakti there, there is karma there, there is various about dharma is also there. But he says the most important tatparyam or the vishaya of the whole Bhagavad Gita is Atma Vidya and Brahma Vidya as a method to remove all our ignorance. Because once Atma Ajnanam is gone, so if in this particular verse, you will see the subject matter brought out is Brahma Vidya. And where did he get the Brahma Vidya? It is from the commentary on the word Panditaha. Through Shruti, like in the Kaivalya Upanishad, we have that verse, Pasham Dahati Panditaha. A Pandita means a spiritually wise person has dropped all forms of bondage. And Adi Shankara says the Vishaya for the Anubandha Chatustaya is Brahma Vidya. Prayojanam means a person who has Brahma Vidya will not have any sorrow. Those of us who are studying the Gita from now till the 30th verse, you will see Sri Krishna will repeat again and again, at least 6 times. Please do not be sorrowful. Oh Arjuna, please do not be sorrowful. Which means if you are experiencing some form of grief, that you have not understood your true nature. So the prayojanam of the Gita is not to be sorrowful. Who is the Adhikari? The Adhikari is Arjuna now, who is the surrendered person is the Adhikari. And that is why in this verse you have the Anubandha Chatustaya, the fourfold aspects before any scriptural verse. The next verse, verse 12, will be by Dr. Suman. Over to you, Dr. Suman.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Natve vaham jatu nasam natvam neme janadipaha na chaiva na bhavishyamaha sarve vayamata param. Having condensed the Gita Shastram, Krishna is now going to elaborate. The ultimate aim of Krishna here now is to persuade Arjuna to fight the Mahabharata war, because that is his immediate problem. To solve this problem, Krishna is taking a 3-pronged attack to make Arjuna fight the war. One is from a philosophical angle, second from the ethical angle, and third from the worldly angle. So whatever the strategy, Arjuna has to fight the war. Of these 3, which one is the main argument in the Gita? It is the philosophical approach, which is the primary approach in the Gita. The ethical approach is also given importance, and the worldly approach is of least importance. In the philosophical approach, Krishna talks about the true nature of Arjuna, true nature of Krishna, Atma Vidya, Atma Tattvam. For this, we have to summarize about Atma. Then these verses become clear. The important features of Atma are that it is aprameya. It is ever the experiencer, never the experienced. It is nitya. It is eternal. It is nirvikara. It is changeless. It is sarvagataha. It is all pervading. It is akarta. It is not a doer. Abhokta. It is not an enjoyer. This is the essence of Atma Vidya. So in the 12th verse, Krishna points out that Atma is Nitya, that is eternal. This eternal Atma was in the past, Atma is in the present, and Atma will be in the future also. Philosophical approach is discovering that Arjuna is none other than the Atma Swarupam. Similarly, Bhishma, Drona, etc. are also Atma only. The philosophical approach is Sarvam Atma Mayam Jagat. And Krishna will point out that the Atma is, which is Chaitanya Swarupam, is neither a Karta nor a Bhokta. And therefore, there is no question of anybody killing or anybody being killed. It is just shifting the vision. Here, Swamiji gives a beautiful example of a clay pot. When you look at the pot as a pot, you talk about the making of the pot and the destruction of the pot. But once you shift the vision and see that it is nothing but clay, then the clay is always there. Before it became a pot, during its shape as a pot, and even when it was destroyed, nothing is lost and it continues to remain as clay. Training the mind to understand that there are no individuals except Atma, which is neither born nor die. And since there is no birth or death, there is no question of somebody destroying or somebody getting destroyed. And therefore, there is no question of punyam or papam. And therefore, Arjuna, you should do your duty. This is the highest philosophical approach, which requires a very subtle, refined, sharp intellect. Next comes the ethical angle, which consists of the dharmika drishti and the adhyatmika drishti. For the question as to whether it is proper to fight this war, Krishna says, yes, for the sake of dharma, a kshatriya must be ready to give up his life and take to war. Krishna conveys that because Bhishma, Drona is Atma, they cannot be killed. So Arjuna, you need not weep. Killing these people is not ahimsa. It is like giving capital punishment for a criminal. For the sake of dharma samstapanam, so for the ethical angle also, you should wage this war, and therefore Arjuna, you should fight. Lastly, Krishna explanation from the worldly point of view is that as long as you're in a society, you are conscious of your self-esteem, your social status, and how other people think of you. This is the Laukika Drishti. And for this also, we have to fight and we have to safeguard our honor. Concluding about the 12th verse, Krishna says, Atma is eternal. Atma was in the past, is in the present, and Atma will be in the future also. Our present existence is doubtless, and therefore Krishna does not discuss that. Only in the past and future we have a doubt, and therefore Krishna says, in the past and future also the Atma existed. Therefore, what is the essence? The essence is Atma is eternal. Hari Om, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Suman, for giving us a clear explanation of this important verse, which tells us that Atma is eternal. We have to translate Atma to something very important. I am eternal. Swami Paramatmananda ji gives a very great importance to I am. I represents consciousness, because only a conscious being can talk about I. Am stands for existence. This conscious existence in me is what is eternal. And this is what we will understand through the next verses also. Now, through Shruti, through Yukti, through Anubhuti, we really need to see that I have been there from the very beginning, if there is a beginning. It is not that I came into being the day I was born into the world. I have always been there. And you will see it is not the death of the body, which is not the death of me. That understanding will come, that I am eternal, that I have been there from the very beginning, if there is a beginning, and I will be there till the very end, if there is an end. And if this understanding becomes so clear, the fear of death and all the insecurity relating to myself and others will be affected, will be shaken. The next verse, another important verse, is by Dr. Raksha. Over to you, Dr. Raksha.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. This verse 13 is a very well-known and often quoted verse. Dehi nosmin yata dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tata dehantara praptihi dhirastatra namuhyati. Yata, just as dehinaha, the atma, asmin dehe, which is in this body, kaumaram, childhood or boyhood, yauvanam, youth, and jara, old age, tata, so also it goes through dehantara praptihi, attainment of another body. Dhiraha na muhyate, a wise man does not worry over such a thing. In this verse, Lord Krishna establishes the principle of transmigration of soul from one lifetime to another. If I am eternal, I, the capital I, what is birth and what is death? Birth and death are nothing but changing of the medium of interaction, which is the physical body. Physical body is subject to change regularly. In fact, science informs us that cells within the body undergo regeneration, old cells die away, and new ones take their place. It is estimated within 7 years, practically all the cells of the body change, though slowly. Further, the molecules within the cell change, but more rapidly. So change is a continuous, ongoing process. In this body, there are 4 states that we experience in our lifetime. Balyam, childhood; Kaumaram, boyhood or girlhood; Yauvanam, youth; and Jara, old age. Now, when these changes take place, do I change or do I change my name? My identity is not changed even when the body changes. It is the same I, the capital I again. Like we say, I went to that school and then I studied in that college and I worked here and so on. So, what is the constant factor? It is the I. We identify with the transition easily, but just extending it a little further. As in this verse, Deha is the body and Dehi is the indweller or the possessor of this body or the soul. Once the gross body is dropped, the subtle body migrates to another body. Lord Krishna uses the word Dhiraha here. Dhiraha is a wise person, a person with discrimination, a strong person, a person who is never deluded. Bhagavad Shankaracharya says Dhiraha literally means Dhiman, one endowed with the knowledge of the self or Vedantic knowledge. Such a person understands the changing nature of things and beings in the world and rises above samsara. Krishna is telling Arjuna, there is no cause for lamentation, O Arjuna, on account of death neither of Bhishma nor Drona, for whom he is so much concerned. So, the essence of this verse is to bring about that I, the indweller, does not undergo any change. It is nirvikaraha. Hari Om, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Aksha, for explaining this important, very often quoted verse where the essence of all Vedanta is brought out. Again, I will call this as the Alpha and the Omega. Right in the beginning of our understanding, we need to see that this body is mine. I am the one who's using this body to interact. Just like I use this computer, just as I use my vehicle, just as I use my pen to write. All these are instruments of my interaction. And the aging and the disease and the limitations of my instruments should not be my limitations. The real problem happens, what happens when this body drops? When this body drops, then the real test of our understanding comes there, as so beautifully illustrated at the time of the death of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, which is also meaningful when it comes to another Gita verse where Vasamsi Jirnani. Just like when the body gets worn out, you drop it. This was a very dramatic scene when Sri Paramahamsa was dying. And when the doctors had given up all hopes, like any wife, Mata Sharada broke down into tears in front of him. And Sri Ramakrishna has reportedly looked into her eyes and said, what the doctors are talking about is not about me. He says, I'm going to be there forever. I am Nityaha. This body's dropping is not my death. He was so convincing in her explanation that it is said in the history of widowhood, she was so exceptional that she didn't go through the emotional trauma of the loss of her husband. She understood what is Nityatvam and what is Satya and what is Mithya. We have another important verse to be able to handle such situations. Venkatesh Prasad.
Thank you, sir. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. The verse 2.14 goes like this. Matra sparshastu kaunteya shitoshna sukha dukkhadaha agama payino nityaha tam stitikshasva bharata. O Arjuna, sense organs and objects which cause cold, heat, pleasure, and pain are subject to arrival and departure. They are impermanent. O Arjuna, endure them. Here, Krishna says that just as you understand and accept the nature of Atma, similarly, you should understand and accept the nature of Anatma also. Wisdom consists in accepting the nature of a thing. Nature of a thing can never be changed. However, our attitude towards that can be changed. As we see in the next slide, when summer comes, sun will be hot. It lights up the whole earth. Atmosphere will get heated up. What a Bhagwan's Srishti! 9 crore miles away, he has created an energy source. Entire humanity is not able to find out a source of energy. They are not able to find a replacement. So, therefore, learn to accept the glory of the sun. Observe another great phenomenon of sweating due to the heat. See the function of thermostat in your body. Both the sun and sweating are gifts of Bhagavan, and learn to change your attitude towards both and appreciate them. Similarly, extend this towards other inert things and later towards living beings, particularly human beings and their behavior. Krishna warns Arjuna not to resist the facts and invite sorrow. Therefore, he says, Matra sparshastu. Matra means the sense organs. Ma means to know. To experience is Ma. Pramana has come from that. Tra means instrument. So matra means instrument of experience. Niyati abhihi iti matraha. And what are the instruments of experience? The pancha gnanendriyani, the 5 sense organs. Sparsha means sense objects, objects of contact. Sprishante iti sparshaha. So whether you like it or not, there are sense organs, there are sense objects, and they are going to interact. You may close your eyes if you do not wish to see something. May close your nose if you do not wish to smell. But can you plug your ears? No. As a result, you hear all sorts of comments, criticisms. As such, you cannot avoid interaction of sense organs and sense objects. By going to forest and living in caves, one can avoid traffic noise, other local noises, and people. But there will be insects and other animals that may cause disturbances. So escaping is not the solution, but accepting, facing, and living with the situation is. This will increase inner strength and resistance capacity. Therefore, Arjuna, accept them, Krishna says. Next slide, sir. And what will life brings? Oxymoron. It brings everything in pairs of opposite. Shitoshna sukha dukkhada. They will give heat and cold, pleasure and pain, etc. So the whole life is a series of opposite experiences. If manam comes, apamanam will come. If samyoga takes place, viyoga will follow. If there is growth, there will be decay. If there is gain, there will be loss. Life is a series of these things. This is the nature of anatma and agamapayanaha. They are all subject to arrival and departure. Agate swagatam kuryat, gachantam nanivarayat. When they come, be mentally prepared to welcome. When they go, be mentally prepared to send them off. Those things we are prepared to welcome will not come as often as we like them to. And certain other things we want to send off permanently keep coming frequently. Therefore, be ready for both. Agamapayanaha anityaha means that they are all impermanent. In the previous shloka, Krishna talked about nitya atma. Here he is talking about anitya atma. Accept both. Tan titikshasva bharata. May you develop endurance. May you develop inner strength. May you increase your physical immunity and may also increase your mental immunity. More than physical, mental immunity must be stronger. Krishna goes on and on. Hari Om. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Venkatesh Prasad, for a nice explanation of an important verse, Matra Sparsha Su Kaunteya. This is an important verse, particularly relevant for all of us when we wake up in the morning. When we wake up in the morning, the mind becomes available. The mind becomes available for our sense organs. The sense organs, when they interact with the sense objects, invariably you get all kinds of sensations. You will experience heat or cold at the level of the sense organs. But the real power in a spiritual seeker is in your mind. The mind is now able to say, is this sukha or dukkha, or how do I handle it? Titiksha, Krishna says, all spiritual seekers should be mentally strong, to be mentally tough, and not to lose your equilibrium, because remember, this whole world is mithya, and mithya is as as the next verse says, agama pahino anityaha. It is temporary. All the bad things that you're experiencing will go away. All the good things that you're experiencing are also going to go away. And therefore, the only way is to be mentally strong. Tam titikshasva bharata. The word bharata is also very beautiful. The word bha means knowledge. What kind of knowledge? The second part will explain what kind of knowledge. Rata means ramante. Ramante means to revel. What kind of knowledge do you revel in? You revel in spiritual knowledge. That is why the acharyas of Sringeri are called Bharati. Bharati is also a name for Saraswati. Bharati here means one who revels in Brahma Vidya. And that is why whenever Arjuna has given so many names, and each of those names are very meaningful. There is a book by Hermann Hesse which has won the Nobel Prize called Siddhartha. One of the characters here has certain important characteristics, which he says, I can fast for any amount of time. I can wait for any amount of time to get my objective done. You will see there are moments when you are extremely hungry, and when you are kept waiting, you lose your equilibrium. In our day-to-day life, I want you to see how this verse will come into play whenever you are at the physical limits and you still have to wait. Remember, matra sparsha sukhaunteya sita ushna sukha dukkadaya agama pahino anityaha tam titikshasva bharata. The next important verse and related to this will be by Apeksha. Over to you, Apeksha.
Hari Om, sir. Yam hinaha vyatha yantyete pursham pursha shabha sam dukha sukham dhiram so amrit tatvaye kalpate. O Arjuna, that person with whom these sense organ and objects do not disturb, who is equanimous in pain and pleasure, and who is wise alone becomes fit for immortality. Here Krishna talks about a very, very important virtue which is called the tiksha. It's called mental endurance, or the inner mental strength that we have. What is the tiksha? Not to react immediately, not to get irritated immediately, not to punish immediately someone when we feel bad. Because lack of this endurance is the cause of all problems, because lack of endurance leads to irritation, irritation leads to anger, and anger sometimes leads to himsa. For example, you must have observed sometimes in a family when a child is called and the child does not comes immediately in a minute, he or she takes 1 minute, the parents will get angry. They'll get irritated, they'll react immediately, and the anger will come, and sometimes himsa also comes. Even in our day-to-day life examples, we can see if there's a traffic jam and one person is there and he starts honking the horn as if the traffic jam is going to disperse because of the horn. Everyone starts honking the horn and imagining when will this end. So this is nothing but lack of patience. And Krishna says, even in the old days, if you would have seen, when a disciple used to go to Gurukul, one of the key quality was patience. He was asked to herd the cows, to go and cut firewood, to go and cook food for a few years before the Guru actually thought that he was ready to impart the knowledge. Because for any deep study, one requires patience, one requires calmness to actually absorb the in-depth knowledge that the Guru wants to impart. So that is why Krishna says that mental endurance, the tiksha, is a very important virtue for anyone to achieve this atma jnanam. And there's a very beautiful prayer, which we should be saying every day. Oh Lord, give me the strength to change what can be changed. Oh Lord, give me the strength to accept what cannot be changed. And oh Lord, give me the wisdom. Give me the wisdom to know the difference between what can be changed and what cannot be changed. Now, this is very, very important for anyone, the discrimination to know what can be changed and what cannot be changed. What happens is, if we don't have the discrimination, then throughout our life, we accept things that can be changed, for which remedies are there, and if we put in the effort, it can be changed. But the things which cannot be changed, when we don't have that knowledge, When we don't have that wisdom, we keep on fighting. We keep on fighting in vain, hoping that it is going to change. For example, the changing nature of this world, it's not going to change. And once a person understands this discrimination and knows that this cannot be changed, what happens? He becomes undisturbed by the changes of the world. He becomes calm and tranquil and ready to absorb the deep knowledge, the atma jnanam. So there's a very beautiful example in the next line, which everyone will relate to. Whenever we go on a road, whenever our car goes on the road, there might be a lot of potholes, there might be a lot of speed bumps. One thing is that road after road, because on a speed bump, the car will jump violently. So you can change all the roads. One option is we can continue to change all the roads that the car goes on. And the other option that we have is that we put in the shock absorber. And it's not going to mean if we put the shock absorber that there's not going to be any reaction on the car. It is still going to, the violent reaction will come down. Similarly, this car is just equivalent to our mind. So one thing is we change the people, the situations. Can we change our husbands? Can we change our families? Can we change anyone around us? Can we change the situations that every day we are facing right now in our life? It's not in our hands. But what we can change is put in the shock absorber in our mind. Now, how does this shock absorber help? It's not that we are not going to have any reaction, just that the intensity, the anger, the sadness will reduce. And there's a very important, very good saying. It says when a person is a uttama purush, the reaction time, the reaction is still there. The anger comes in that, in that person, but it is just for a moment. In a moment, the anger comes and it fades away. If you're a mediocre person, the anger will be there, the irritation will be there, the reaction will be there for 1.5 hours. If you are lowest of the person, it will be for a day. Look around yourself. You might be angry with your children or a husband for one day. There are so many people. For one day, they're angry. They'll keep on their fights. And next day also it goes. And if you are the lowest of the lowest, you will be angry until the end of your life. So the Krishna here is talking about developing titiksha, patience, and becoming the Uttama Purush, where you put in the shock absorber in your mind for whatever situations and people. You have the wisdom, you gain the wisdom of things that cannot be changed. You accept them full-heartedly, and you are undisturbed by the changes in the world around you. Next slide, sir. So therefore, titiksha does not mean that there's going to be total freedom from reaction. There's no one which will not have any reaction. It just means that you're able to manage your own emotions in a way that in a moment you are not, you are back to your normal. And such a mind can only quietly study Vedanta and is fit for Atma Jnanam. So titiksha, develop that titiksha. That is why we all are here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Apeksha, for a nice explanation of this verse. The 14th verse spoke about the sadhana or the qualification of titiksha, where you become mentally strong. The 15th verse talks of sama dukkha sukham. It talks about samatvam. So that means through the preparatory qualifications, one can get to Brahma Vidya. And it is through Brahma Vidya you're able to have that inner shock absorber. So whatever the external situation is, you have that quality of samatvam. And then you become the best of all the Purusha. Purusha Rishabha. You will hear numerous words in which Krishna refers to Arjuna. And all these are beautiful words. The word Rishabha. Rishabha is also referred to Nandi because Nandi is one of the greatest of devotees of Lord Shiva. Rishabha means Shrestha, the best of them all. We come to verse 16, and verse 16 goes like this. I will explain this verse for you. The verse is like this. Nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha, ubayorapi drishtantantatu anyosta tattva darshibihi, which means Atma is real, Atma is independently existing. The actual word meaning does not make much sense. It says that there is no existence for the unreal. The unreal has no existence. There is no non-existence for the real. That means Krishna wants us to know clearly what is the difference between what is existent and what is non-existent. Now we have come to the topic of existence. Wherever the topic of existence comes, you will see the commentaries of Adi Shankara become tremendous. Swamiji gives a lot of talks because existence is something very difficult to understand, because all that I experience around me, including my body, is existent. What do you mean by existent? So we have to come to two terms, what is called Satya and Mithya. Whatever I experience is of a lower order of reality, that is called Mithya, and the experiencer in me, the Atma, is Satya. Atma has an independent existence. Whatever around me is dependent on Atma because it is revealed because of Atma. Now, every object in this world has got two natures. One is called its own intrinsic nature. In Sanskrit, it's called swabhavika, and the other is called the incidental nature. The intrinsic nature is always there. It is permanent. The agantuka, the incidental nature, comes and goes. Example is given of a vessel which is boiling water. The water is now boiling and hot because the vessel which is in contact with is hot. The vessel is hot because it is in contact with fire. The fire is hot not because of its contact with anything else. The fire is hot because its intrinsic nature is heat. Because of its intrinsic nature, it is able to share its nature to the vessel. The vessel is now incidentally hot. And because it is incidentally hot, the water becomes incidentally hot. Now, what is real and what is not real? Now, all of Vedanta is a distinction between asatoma sadgamaya. How do we study this? We study this through Shruti, Yukti, and Anubhuti. Vedanta says, go through your own experiences and tell yourself, what is that which has been there all the time in you, and what is there which comes and goes? If you see your own photograph when you were a small child, you will see how much your body has changed. As Dr. Aksha said in the earlier presentation, every 7 years our body undergoes almost a complete change. Not only physically, emotionally, psychologically, also we undergo change. So there is something in me that is constantly changing, but there is something that has never undergone a change. Additionally, you will see when you go to sleep, this whole world disappears. That which appears and disappears is not as real as the witness of the disappearance of the world. When you go to sleep, you will say, I did not know anything. But one thing I know for sure, I was there because I was there to tell you I slept well. When you dream, this world has disappeared, a new world has come, but there is a witness in all of us who is able to relate to that dream. So Sat or truth is that which is there in all three periods of time. It is there when I'm awake, it is there in my dreams, it is there in my deep sleep. So that which is in and through all three periods of time is called Sat. My waking world, including my waking body, is not so real. So Tattvadarshibhihi, the wise people, what do? Now they know the distinction on where to put all their investment on. They do not rely on this body-mind. The body-mind is only used for transactional purposes. For long-term to rely on, they have to rely on Atma. Initially, what we do, we rely on a symbol of God, and then we move to the Atma concept. Tam Stitikshasva Bharata. That is the only way. The more you understand this distinction between Asatoma Sadgamaya. What is Sat and Asat? Here by Asat means not that which is unreal, but what is Mithya. Mithya means that which appears to be real. What is unreal? For example, the normal Vedantic example is a rabbit's horn. Rabbit's horn is non-existential, and something that is non-existential does not create a problem. But what appears and what appears to be real, and if I take that as real, like mirage, and in a desert, if I go after that water, then I can create a lot of problems. Now, see this experience. We always see the sunset and sunrise. My eyes can clearly see the sun setting and the sun rising. But is that true? Whatever my eyes see is not true. The reality is other than my experience. Although I may experience this world as tangible and real, through Shruti, Yukti, and Anubhuti, we come to know this world has got a dependent reality. It is mithya compared to the experiencer. So the whole shift is being from that which is experienced to the experiencer, from mithya to satya. There is one verse in the Dakshinamurti Stotra, Yasyaiva Spuranam Sadatmakam Asatkalpartakam Bhasate Sakshat Tattvamasi Sriveda Vachasa Yo Bodha Yad Ashrita Yes Sakshat Karana Bhavait Na Punara. That means if you have understood this distinction between Sat and Asat, Sri Krishna and the Dakshinamurti, Sri Adi Shankar and the Dakshinamurti says, such a person will never come back to this world of becoming. You will move away from samsara. So to move away from samsara is this key verse, Asatoma Sadgamaya. And this is possible through the grace of the Guru, Sri Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. With this, we conclude today's classes of 6 important verses, which we need to relook into each word and see how we are able to remember these verses. We will have these verses chanted by Mrs. Smita Pai. Over to you, Smita.
Thank you, Doctor. Shri Bhagavanuvacha Ashochananvashocastvam Prajnavadamsha bhashase Gatasuna Nanushocanti panditaha Natvevaham jatu nasam Natvam neme janadipaha Nachaiva na vivashyamaha Sarve vayamatah param Dehinosmin yata dehe Kaumaram yauvanam jara Tata dehantara praptihi Dhirastatra namuhyati Matra sparshastu kaunteya Shitoshna sukha dukkadaha Agama pahino nityaha Tampi tikshasva bharata Yam hina vyatayantyete Purusham purushashabha Samadukha sukham dhiram Somruktatvaya kalpate Nasato vidyate bhavaha Na bhavo vidyate sataha Ubayorapi drishtotaha Vanayostatvadarshabihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Thank you.
Thank you, Smita. Thank you, sir, and thank you to all the speakers. Wow, we saw the truth being revealed in such a straightforward manner, very terse, maybe making it very hard to understand. Lord Krishna's teachings started with the crux of Vedanta. But don't worry, we will be coming back to this many times. Lord Krishna will explain in many ways the details. Just have Shraddha, have faith, be patient. Again, to understand Vedanta basics, terms and terminologies, we encourage you to go to the seven sessions of Introduction to Vedanta available on YouTube under Param Vedanta. The whole Bhagavad-Gita will make, you'll get much more out of it. We conclude our second class of Bhagavad-Gita verse by verse. Do go through the notes. Please log in on Monday for the 16th session of Vivekachudamani at 6:45 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om. Thank you.